Hello and welcome to Living Resonance. I'm Monifa, and today we're exploring the cosmic currents of the gene keys and the lunar cycle. So you can cultivate your voice, shape your presence, and weave your legacy in harmony with these frequencies. So today we have the lunar phase of the new moon in Taurus, which is gene key 23, which is also human design 23, which is also gate 27 for those who are on the East Coast. So you're on the East Coast US, you might have that time. You do have that gate. And this coast, so on the West Coast, we have 23 going on. So it is a very finely tuned version of astrology, as you can tell. And here we are experiencing the themes of complexity, which is the shadow, simplicity, which is the gift, and quintessence, which is the city, the highest essence of this frequency of 23 in the gene keys. So we are going to accept this invitation of this energy in this lunar phase to forgive, release, and embrace any fears we have around being accepted. Okay. So if you sometimes hold yourself back from speaking and being a leader, if you feel like leadership is going to somehow fix that for you before addressing addressing the root of that feeling, right? Then this is a great energy to dive into and embody, which is what we're about here over here in our channel. So you might want to notice your energy, your voice, or anything that you're working on, trying to create right now. Um, that when you think about it, you are trying to control things. So this is a big thing for me, as is, I think, for most people who are contemplating or are living leadership in their lives, is that you want to get it right so that you can be the best version of yourself for people. You want to be able to guarantee a result. That would be awesome, right? Because all the products do guaranteed, guaranteed, but the human experience is not guaranteed, right? So we can invite and we can guide and we can support people in whatever that transformation is, but we can't necessarily make them do it, which would be nice. Control of everything would be nice, but that's not what's happening in this lifetime, right? So, and when we are doing that, we're just trying to make ourselves feel safe, safe in our promise, safe in our value, and others to feel safe, safe in their possibilities, and safe in what's the potential and the ability to fulfill their potential, right? And so this is really a time to just understand that, as human beings, there's flaws, there's dips, there's shadows, there's light. There's all these different aspects that are part of just living your life that don't give you guarantees. And I often say that if we're looking for guarantees in our human experience and how we're going to feel, what we're going to expect other people to do automatically or as a given, then we're looking for somebody to either lie to us or eventually be disappointed, because those things are moment to moment things that need to be readdressed, recommunicated, reasserted, if only in our energy, right? That's how we build up the capacity to receive those things. Solid relationships, expansion in our finances, expansion in our relationships and business with others, partnerships. So that's what we're looking for. We're looking for in this energy, this deep ability to hear what is happening so that we can meet what's needed. And it's not a thing that happens once and is over, right? That's why we talk about cycles and being resonant with the continued movement of energy and frequency and flow of life energy, right? That's the goal here. So if we aren't looking and listening to the now moment in our now presence and body, then we often are missing what is needed and available. Okay. So this is a time when you want to listen in. The frequency of 23 is going to help you hear yourself more deeply so you can lead with greater self awareness. Okay. So if you're noticing the shadow happening in your mind, in your body, and your actions, which we'll talk more about in a second, then this is what you want to move towards, a greater listening and greater self-awareness. So it's a great day really to like sit down, meditate, do some breath work. It's a great day to do my practice of OMance method, which is fully spelled out in our voice section. But we're going to do an aspect today in accordance with the transit. For anybody who has watched previous transits, yes, this is a shift. I'm making a shift in our gene keys so that we can be more aligned with my work that I'm already doing with my clients. So if you haven't been able to participate as a one-on-one client or in one of my courses, you're still getting some of the benefits, right? So what you want to do is know that when you're living in this sphere, um, it can feel like you're being excluded, right? And it's a really big fear that you're not going to be included, that you're not, that people won't like you, that you won't, again, be valuable to people. And you're looking for the people to think the same way you're thinking. So you want to convince them, want to talk enough words so that they will agree with you exactly how you think and exactly the way you want it to come out, right? But what happens instead is that you keep repeating yourself and you actually are making them more confused instead of more clear on how you feel and then even how it applies to them, right? So your audience and those you lead, they feel like you're talking at them instead of to them. Okay, so what you want is to have a clear understanding of where you're coming from so you can notice any fears that come up, not necessarily to pretend like they don't exist, but because if you're feeling it, then you're human. And if you're being human, then you're being what your audience probably is human, right? And so you could have a shared experience instead of explaining to them why you're right about something. Okay, so when you're living primarily in the shadow, which is basically a mindset that's attached to the fear and the patterns around that fear, it can interrupt your sense of timing. You can have a hard time finding the right thing to say, or you just are saying things before you even realize what you're thinking, right? So this is this kind of mistiming. Um, a lot of us that have a very easy way of speaking. I think of extroverts as typified as extroverts, people that just are, gabbers, they can always bring you into a conversation. And that's a gift in and of itself, right? But there are people like me who, in an effort to look normal, like another extrovert or another gabber, they will just keep talking so that they can match the effect of somebody who has something to say, right? And what we find, at least people like me, we find that we are starting to speak before we think, right? And what happens in that is not necessarily we need to, take forever and, overly pause about it. But what happens is that we don't really know what we want to say, and we're talking anyways. So, is the first connection, the first step really here is to deeply connect with yourself, what's true for you, what's important to you, and what you have to say, and what may be a perspective that will include the people that you're talking to, right? And so that will allow them to have a to kind of find their anchor in their viewpoint so that they can recognize the conversation and how it may shift for them, right? How it may shift their world, their understanding, their lived experience. So the right words and the right amount of words are just not available if we're speaking out of fear of wanting to be accepted. Okay. There's this quote that I love from this chapter of the Gene Keys 23. It is, there are people who can give speeches in the most engaging language, but which actually make no sense to the audience whatsoever. The gift of communication does not lie in the speaker's linguistic skills, but somewhere much subtler in the speaker's heart. If even the subtlest trace of fear drives your speech, then the speech can never be fully imbibed by the listener. However, when someone speaks or writes from their heart, you will understand the gist of what they're saying, regardless of how they say it. And I love this quote because it's literally the representation for my life. As you can tell, words don't always come to me easily. I am not a Toastmasters specialist in taking care of all those ums and ahs, right? But I often communicate so clearly and even succinctly at times, a little bit more of a quantum shift for me, but so succinctly that people are just struck with the truth of what I'm saying and what it means for them. And that is the gift I like to pass on to people. So, because I have a system, I had to work at it. Just finding the words at all was hard for me. So, when you have any kind of version of this. So I don't have this key, but it's the absence of it that is felt in my experience and like experience it with other people. When I see people kind of over speaking or talking in circles, trying to get to an idea that never quite comes across. I'll always feel like a sympathy and empathy for people because I understand. I understand where that comes from, right? So on the shadow side, we have these kind of, you know, repressive, which I think of as the negative side of that frequency, and the reactive, which is the positive side of frequency. Again, neither being right or wrong, just charges that happen within this energy. So the repression in the gene keys is called dumb, which is the feeling of being silenced when you don't speak, um, when you can't find the right words, right? So you don't say anything at all. You just stop talking, or you just don't talk at all, or you try to like avoid the conversation. And this happens when you've been silencing yourself so long, right? So this is one of the aspects of that I had to integrate and heal for myself. I had silenced myself, whether it was because other people needed the attention more than I did, or I just didn't know the right thing to say, or I really didn't want to sound stupid and therefore not be accepted. All of those things were reasons why not to say anything at all, right? And what you'll find is that people don't love that. Like sometimes people feel like you're judging them if you're not speaking. At least that's been my experience. So if you felt that, understand that sometimes you just have to say something, whether it's that doesn't always have to be an agreement, but it can just be an aside. Even you don't have to speak directly to the conversation. You can just kind of say, oh well, so you can move the conversation to another thing, how you're feeling, the weather, the what you're wanting to do today, what you're hoping to do with them next, whether that's in the conversation or what your activity is with each other for the day, right? So it doesn't necessarily have to be something that, again, an extrovert might just move into a conversation, whether they're interested in it or not. Introverts have a harder time because they're like, I have no idea and no connection to what you're talking about, and therefore I have nothing to say. That's kind of our standpoint. The reactive side, that positive charge of this frequency, is called fragmented. When you keep talking in circles about the truth, and not about the truth, around the truth, and have no clarity of understanding. And it often comes with a mistiming, saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. speaking at the wrong time, maybe not saying it at the right timing for the people that are involved, right? So this is something that is part of this aspect of like getting the signal of there's something to say, and then are we allowing ourselves to be able to be clear of that within ourselves before we say it and say something. So that is how the shadow shows up. So you'll notice if this is happening for you right now, that what are the indicators, right? What are the indicators? Those that we just spoke about. But then when we get those indicators, what do we do about it? We sit and we listen. We give ourselves a longer pause to hear what's true for ourselves and how we want to communicate something. Okay. The gift, so the same frequency, this is why there's nothing wrong, right? The shadow isn't necessarily bad. I'm even confident calling those negative and positive aspects as, pretty good. Right? They're either way, they are still the shadow, right? Whether it's positive or it's negative, whether it's reactive or it's repressive, it's still showing up as fear, right? So in the gift is when you're being in recognition of that experience of the energy, the frequency, that feelingness of what's going on right now in the lunar cycle, and you allow it to come to its full fruition and its genius. So the mind and ego thrive in complexity. They will look for an even smarter way to say it. They will look for the way that you can most be accepted by your audience so that they will love you forever and ever and ever. But what happens again is that fragmented speech and a further complexity that doesn't allow for people to follow you and follow what you're saying. Okay. Again, known from experience. So, this lunar cycle is inviting you to listen more deeply to yourself so you can embrace simplicity and invite this gift of simplicity. So, these are some ways you can go about that. First, you want to notice where you're living complexity. So, if you have a lot of clutter around you, you can clean that clutter up or move it to someplace else for storage. And once you do that, you can see how your mind responds. How are you feeling? How is it working for you? Right? So just notice, is it an easier place to find the right words, to feel the timing of the project that you want to execute, right? So another possibility is to start understanding what clear hearing and clear translation of hearing is for you. So one of the things that I always address when I'm speaking about singing is this idea of tone deafness. It's not real, right? Either you have actual physical deafness, which is something that's happening physically within the body, or you hear it, you heard something. So the question is, are you translating that something, right, in a way that is effective? So you may get a download, you may be getting divine downloads. And then when you try to communicate them or write them out, it's not coming, right? So what is that interruption within yourself? So again, the OMance practice is one of those ways that you can start discerning where the glitch is, where that timing glitch is, because it's about like how it comes in and when it comes out, right? So there's a rhythm to that. So when you are ready to fully embody this frequency, and you just allow that energy to come in, it brings a sense of relaxation, letting go of what makes life complicated, and invites you and your audience to relax and breathe with you and let things be as they are, right? So, this frequency brings a deep practicality, and this actually assists with our ability to properly manage money. People with this gift in their chart tend to be good with money if they're living this gift, right? They're not wasting money. They're not wasting it just to see if they can throw money at something to see if something will change, right? They are finding simple solutions. And so they tend to be highly resourceful and just don't need to spend money because they're finding just a quick answer that's right in front of them through an instant download. So this frequency is something that happens pretty, I mean, I think all vibrations are pretty instantaneous. It's just a matter, again, how are we processing them and living them out in our experience? But this is a knowing, like an instant knowing of what to do without complicating it, without making it a really long, detailed plan that you have to take 20 months to execute. Like I could have taken 3 weeks, right, to execute the new version of my Gene Keys transits, but it's like, no, right? It's not like I have thousands of people that I have to reorient to my new way of doing things, right? This is just an idea that I feel is better in alignment. I move into the alignment and then I just allow things to evolve as they come, right? I can always have those. If it's, you really miss the old version of the Gene Keys transits, we can always have that conversation. Okay. So this frequency allows you to know things instantly. So it can bring about this ability also to be spontaneous with what you want to say, just living in the moment, seeing what comes up. How can we connect? How do we vibe right now, today, with the people we're speaking to? It can also be a great tap into humor, because humor is that spontaneous perspective that sees the juxtaposition and speaks to it eloquently, so much so that it surprises our nervous system that we're just tickled. We're tickled and we either laugh or laugh at ourselves internally, or maybe even it doesn't have to be, great comedy. This is just about that, like the nervous system charged into this new way of seeing something. And the other beautiful gift that comes with this is that you embody the energy of a great communicator. I heard that there's like an AI thing. I don't know what it's called. But what it does is that it looks at your writing or your transcript of what you've said, and it reads like how much was communicated within how many words. And it can be, you can think of it as a grade iteration, like what part of education have you had to be able to do that? How much of understanding of an idea do you have to like turn complex ideas into simple words? I remember I watched it on Gaia. It was on channeling. And ooh, am I going to remember the guy's name? Super famous channeler. And what they did is they measured his ability to do that in his regular speech, and they measured his ability to be able to do that when he's channeling, which is a different identity personality. And the channeling was through the roof, and how much was communicated in the amount of words that were said. It was through the roof. So this is a frequency, right? So you can, anything that's available is available to anybody. Can you download it is the question. Can you allow yourself to receive that energy and this gift? And so this is a great communicator gift, something that we'd love to embody more of, I think, as leaders and speakers. And it's also great advisor, what do you call it, skills. Okay. So it's this ability to be able to, again, get the answer and be able to say it in a way that people can receive and act on. So, how beautiful is that? So, I know a lot of us are looking to be that person, somebody who can help people to get those things done that they truly want to be a part of their lives. So, this is a beautiful energy to sit with and embody during this lunar transit. Okay. So here we go, here we go. What we're gonna do is we're gonna do the first step of my OMance method. Again, the full method as it stands is now in the voice playlist. So if you go to that voice lesson or voice session playlist, we do it for each session. Okay. And today we're just going to do this first step, which is just the breathing out part of the method. And there's so many things that this does. For everything from trigger the toning of the vagus nerve. And again, a lot of people think breathing or breath work by itself or any breath work will do this. I do not agree. I think it has to be done in a certain and specific way. It has to be something that will actually trigger the nervous system, right? And I believe that this breathing out is that way if you don't already have one, okay? So you get that immediate parasympathetic response of calmness, and you allow yourself to drop into your body in ways that you haven't before. So they're kind of like two results that could happen from that. You can feel great about it, and you can feel really uncomfortable. Those are kind of the two things that happen. You may feel calmer, but you may feel more uncomfortable because you're recognizing fears, uncertainties, anxieties that have not been fully experienced and felt yet, which is causing the deafness or the ability not to hear and allow for the direct translation, right? Of the whatever our divine download is, right? So the trick here is that we're going to breathe out, and we're not really when you're doing this by yourself until you get that nervous system response of activating that, and I feel it that parasympathetic response as a feelingness around my vocal cords because there's very few nerve endings here. So it's not a direct feelingness, it's kind of a result of the other movement of feeling within my body. And it's very clear because I have this desire to say something and I don't even know what it is yet. I just know that I have something to say. And we kind of always do. There's always something we can speak to, give love to by bringing awareness, attention, connection with our own essence of spirit. So there's always something that's available. Really, there is. I know there's some people that can never find words, and I have been that person. But because of this method, I can always tap in to see what's available because there's always something available. The universe is abundant, right? There's always something available. So this is the practice. You're going to breathe all the way out. You're going to think just visually with a imagination awareness through the perineum, through the floor, into the earth. I'll even take the time to think through my legs, through my feet, into the earth at times. But mostly I'm just trying to get deep into the earth, deep into the earth. So it's a way to affect grounding as well. So there's so much benefit just from this step by itself. So right now we're going to do this together as we breathe all the way out. And then we go to S's. So this is a vocalist and speaker addition. So you can feel those muscles that are giving you all this possibility. Breathing back into the lower belly. And just relax and release. So what I did there is that while I was talking, I'm still breathing out. So that's how I teach it because that brings me to the highest extreme as a teacher, grounds me back in if I'm just floating around because it happens. And it also gives the example I'm trying to show, which is that often we're giving up on breath, we're giving up on the connection and the awareness and an effort to be seen, which is, again, essentially coming from the fear of not being seen and accepted. And so if I can take that extra time, if I can take that extra time, if I can take that extra time, right? I can't help but bring myself to the table. And that is the truth of the thing. And what I did to get to this point that is just entrained in me to be connected when I'm speaking is I did not speak before I felt the connection. So even in things being on the calendar, I just emptied my calendar for the beginning of my business period. And when I was first coaching, I was only speaking if I felt inspired to, or I just felt an overflow of energy, which was rare at that time, that I wanted to do it. I was so excited. I had to get to it, right? And so this is a practice that has retrained my thinking before I speak, or silencing myself out of being afraid that I won't say the right thing. So, some amazing way to embody the practice of the 23rd frequency here in the Gene Keys. So, this will cultivate a deeper resonance with you and your soul's design, which is what we're doing here. So, in closing, I'd like to remind you we're not here to react to astrology, to the stars. We're here to weave their wisdom and their energy into our experience of leadership. We want to weave it into the truth of life flowing through us as our creativity, what we're creating in the world and in our lives. So I invite you to breathe it in, this lovely lunar energy, sound it out once you've anchored in your breath, and live it forward so that we can all be connected in the wisdom and the life and the creation that's available to us. And I will see you on the next phase.